Very slightly late for a number of reasons. Thank you all, welcome. We're very happy to have you here. We'll come back to the welcome and other matters, but we have at the back of the room Rabbi Laura Janner-Klausner. So can we give her a big hand and let her come on first, and she will answer questions after. And thank you. Rabbi Laura needs no introduction. Please go to the podium. Thank you.
Great. Let me just get used to this. Boker Tov. I had a Boker Or. That made me very happy. Good morning. It's great to be here. I'm echoey. Let me just get... Who is on the sound system? Can I be a bit less echoey?
We have a sound.
Can I be a bit less echoey?
He's dealing with it.
He's dealing with it. Great. It's great to be back home, to this important institution, so loved by my late grandfather Barnett and my late father Greville, Zichronam Livracha. May their memory be a blessing. And I'm so proud to say that they loved being presidents of the board. They cherished this word in our household. The board were words of kavod, and that's what I have in my heart. And I know that my father would applaud our brave president, Marie van der Zyl, when she told me firmly that what matters is that no Jew should feel isolated due to their affiliation or views, and we all have to respect each other. That is a wonderful principle. It's great. That was my brief, and I think it's a wonderful one for this speech. It's been a week of promises, of manifestos, red, blue, yellow, and green, and also an excellent one from the board itself, reflecting the high quality of the team led by its astute, charismatic, and principled Gillian Merron. I'm going to clap that. My rabbinic and cantorial colleagues have also just produced a voting guide, not who to vote for, but about issues, so that our right, our imperative to vote, will think about particular issues: democracy, polarization, climate crisis, refugees, racism, intolerance, LGBT+, Israel, Palestine, to name a few. And Judaism has a manifesto for ourselves, for our city, for our country and the world. Judaism's manifesto is L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to impact the world in partnership with the creator of all life. And this is our role as Jewish citizens, to be active, to make our views heard and impact on public debate, to ensure that this fantastic country benefits from all that it has to offer, and all that our community has to offer. We should be so proud of ourselves as Jews, as confident and contributing British citizens. Our manifestos all have one element in common. They ask others how to act in certain ways. But we know that the best relationships, like covenants, are mutual. And our community needs to ask, what must we do? How must we act to each other so we can preserve our religious civilization and the community that we love for future generations? So I believe there are a clear set of issues, a form of manifesto for all of us, which is certainly not party-specific. I call this a Derech Eretz manifesto, a manifesto of good old Derech Eretz, of acting properly, courteously, restoring dignity and restoring Derech Eretz to ourselves and to Britain, because we know that Derech Eretz The way of the world, manners, kadma l'Torah, comes before Torah, how we act. And we cannot lead a Jewish life, however we define Torah, without proper manners, without treating each other correctly and decently. So the first part of a cross-communal Derech Eretz manifesto is accountability. Accountability for how we talk and how we act with each other. Accountability means being able to answer for what we say, in person or online, having to answer for how we act. I'm concerned that as a community, we've swapped the beauty of nuance for puerile put-down, critique for insult, and the benefit of the doubt for the worst possible interpretation. Where, when you need it, is the wisdom of the Mishnaic statement that we always have to judge the other favorably. Now we need this. And instead of attacking when you disagree, the Derech Eretz way is to turn the attack into a question, assuming good intention. And the best example, I feel, of ill intent that we seem to have lost, the skill of being able to have sensible discussions about Israel. We prejudge intentions, we insult. We find it hard to acknowledge the truth on the other side of the argument, whichever side, and we label our fellow Jews, our brothers and sisters, as traitors. This is not Derech Eretz. We even stoop to challenge the Jewishness of those with whom we disagree. This has to stop. When we do this, we drive people away. We drive away young people who feel that their well-being is threatened by the public Jewish debate, rather than challenged or inspired or nurtured by it. What does it look like to have a community of Derech Eretz in which we proactively nourish our diversity? It means that accepting that at Kiddush, or funerals, shivers, when we sit at the Board of Deputies, we sit with people whose views we really might not like. It doesn't mean we have to be comfortable. It's not meant to be comfortable community. Derech Eretz isn't about comfort. It's the opposite. It's about living with the discomfort, but without dumping our discomfort, our fears, our anger on other people. Derech Eretz is living honourably with those we disagree and giving others the benefit of the doubt. It's no chokhmah, no wisdom, to behave properly to others with whom you agree. It's easy. The challenge, the mitzvah, is holding yourself back. Don't write it. Don't say it. Assume good intentions. Ask a question. Why do you think that? It'll transform our lives. We can hasten the Messiah. We can then return to the golden Jewish capacity of machloket l'shem shamayim, disagreements for the sake of heaven. It is derech eretz to be very careful how we respond when we're anxious, as fears and angers tend to clash with wise, considered behavior. One of our raw fears is of rising anti-Semitism. So how do we respond with care and effectiveness? We can't just demand, stamp it out. It's too primitive. Yet it expresses that primitive thing that we feel. It releases adrenaline and anger and fear, but it is not a plan. We can't stamp our feet and expect racism to disappear. What could be a response of Derech Eretz? Open our doors. Just when we want to turn inwards and close our doors and our hearts out of fear, that's exactly the moment we have to open doors to others. Think of Seder, the very moment of our vulnerability, when we're really angry, when we justifiably think of history and we say, Shvoch hamatcha lagoyim, asher lo yaducha, pour out your wrath on the nations. What do? We open the front door just when we feel vulnerable. So at the moment when we feel unsafe, open the door. A communal manifesto of Derech Eretz is to hold back our strong impulses and instead open our door. Invite in people we don't know or we don't know yet. Invite in teachers, politicians, local councillors, neighbours, and yes, specifically, dafka, those with whom we disagree, so that we can change their minds or even have our minds changed. We tackle anti-Semitism by being precise in our interventions and by opening up conversations with those who don't yet know Jews. The Institute for Jewish Policy Research stresses that there's a difference between an anti-Semite and someone who perhaps inadvertently holds anti-Semitic views. We must challenge anti-Semitism with practical solutions and give such people a ladder to climb down. I don't want us to be a community defined by what we're opposed to, or even worse, defined by the hate directed at us. We must continue unapologetically to fulfill our duty and engage with and influence wider society for the better. As important actors, here, our deputies, I urge you to reject Fortress Judaism. We must not put ourselves back in the ghetto. For instance, I'm proud that we live in a country that has legal same marriage, or what we could call equal marriage. The welfare of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans plus people particularly means a lot to me, as a rabbi, as an ally, and as a parent. And this year, the government has been discussing relationship and sex education, or RSE. All primary children will learn that not everyone lives in what used to be called a traditional family. Sometimes it's mum and mummy, or ima and ima. Sometimes it's that parents don't live with each other. A Derech Eretz agenda would support this, must support those relationships and sex education guidelines that ensure that from an early age, children will hear that there are many ways that we build families. RSC doesn't attempt to encourage or persuade. And we know that mental health issues are more prevalent amongst the LGBT plus community, and that acceptance is one of the steps that we can take to improve this. This is especially true as the rise in hate crime is far more directed to lesbians and gays and bisexuals, and then even more to trans people, than to Jews or Muslims. We must be allies to others. This is the core of Derech Eretz, standing alongside others. And this may be uncomfortable for some in our community, and we've seen lobbying against relationship and sex education from a few ultra-Orthodox communities, suggesting that relationship and sex education proposals are an infringement on religious freedom. And astonishingly, from just one rabbi, I'm happy to say, just one, who stated that Jews should even give up their lives before submitting to the new guidelines. It's important because it's not just Jews who believe Kol Yisrael Arvim Zeh B'Zeh. It's not just Jews who see us, not just Jews who see each other as responsible, but the rest of the world sees us. And this story was covered by the BBC under the headline, LGBT Teaching an Abomination, Jewish Judge Says, which could be you, or me, or you, or you. It pains me that people who are not Jewish will not distinguish between this outlying view and the rest of our community, which paradoxically has been shown by statistics in the country to be more liberal on LGBT issues than the majority of the country. You, our board deputies, are in a unique position to clarify that most Jews consider this an extreme and extraordinary intervention. Our Derech Eretz manifesto must commit us to working together and being seen to work together and lead together. Yes, it's an improvement that we've stopped criticising different mainstream Jewish movements in public. But if that is the only way that we can manage Derech Eretz, then the bar of decency, of cross-communal collaboration, is horrendously low. I believe that Derech Eretz demands of us as a community that we proactively, transparently collaborate on issues like interfaith and housing, the environment, the future impact of artificial intelligence on our communities and the society as a whole. We have to have open conversations where no professional or layperson is banned from appearing in public with another, just in case, chas v'chalila, God forbid, this is seen as some kind of approval of the other. This is disgraceful to ban each other. This is continuing. This is Anglo-Jewry's version of Emperor's New Clothes. Everyone knows it. They're professionals, leaders, rabbis who are forbidden to teach together, debate together, or even be photographed for last week's wonderful mitzvah day together. But we don't say it aloud. But now we have to. Now we have to sit together because the issues are crucial, whether Holocaust, anti-Semitism, Israel, interfaith, racism, or the fact that our community is funded by just a few, about 100 astonishingly generous philanthropists, but that the next generation is not picking up the baton of tzedakah in the same way. We have to do this together. These are not religious issues. These fall within the now moribund 1998 Stanmore Accords, the cross-communal agreement about how all denominations should work together, looking up at it with integrity and decency for the good of the community and not downwards at our parochial, territorial concerns. Those are not Derech Eretz. And we need you, our deputies, to hold us all into account so that we will work together for the good of our community as a whole. This is where our conversation must be. The solutions lie working in unity, accepting our differences and pooling our talents. When we agree, let's plan together. And when we disagree, let's say it and let's lay a foundation for constructive disagreements for the sake of heaven, for the sake of our precious community. I've learned loads recently from a project that I'm involved in called Real Conversations, which teaches that Jews and Muslims who live in areas of high segregation, it teaches Jews and Muslims the skills of having those difficult, awkward, uncomfortable conversations. Participants begin to see disagreements as opportunities which deepen relationships and not moments where relationships fall apart. We call it turning a difficult conversation into a real conversation. It's time to have more real conversations where we disagree constructively and strengthen the fraying bonds within our own community. This is Derech Eretz. It's not Derech Eretz to avoid, deride, diminish, or prohibit conversations. This is simply not Jewish. I may totally disagree with those in our community who, for example, do not believe in a two-state solution. However, it is their right to say it and for us to have a jolly good row. Your president's insistence that no Jew must feel isolated due to our affiliation or views has to be our guiding principle, not just for the board, but for our community as a whole. Ken yehi ratzon. May this be God's will. Thank you. Can I say something off the record? Can I just say, it's really weird to be here and have Dad and Grandpa in the background. It's lovely. Sorry.
Rabbi Laura, you have more than extensively covered my brief. And I know that you said you didn't mind being held to account by deputies. Could I ask you, just because of time constraints, would you allow 3 questions?
Yeah, whatever, of course.
Come on, deputies.
Especially from iPhone.
You were very quick. If 2 others want to come, otherwise 1 question. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ivan Lawrence, Northwest Surrey Reform Synagogue. Can I congratulate you, and you can see by your reception on what was an excellent speech.
Thank you, Ivan.
And congratulate Mary for inviting you.
Marie. Marion.
Actually, Sir Ivan is right.
I've always known her as Mary, and I'll always call her Mary, even if it's wrong.
And my sister's name, that's
part of our theme of togetherness, which was started, as far as I was concerned, by your dear father, who invited me to join the Board of Deputies over 40 years ago. I think it was 41, but it may be 42 years, when he said, I'm a Labour MP, and I think a Conservative MP ought to be on the Board of Deputies. Would you like to join? That's your theme of togetherness. Later on, and I can tell you that I was a small number of Reform and Liberal members on the board at that time, and there wasn't a great deal of closeness between the Reform, the Progressive, and the Orthodox. And I remember being asked by Greville if I would give the vote of thanks to Chief Rabbi Jacobowitz, who came and addressed the board, and a sort of an internal war broke out. How dare the President invite a Reform Jew to...
Have to finish, but thank you.
I'll be very quick. How dare
you're on red, I'm
you
really
invite
sorry.
a Reform Jew...
Rules apply to everyone. Sorry, we have to make it clear.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
my question is...
No, thank you.
He's a
All right,
parliamentarian. What
This
do
is
you
it. Be
want?
very quick. And I'm doing this for Rabbi Laura, not for anybody else.
Over the many years when I have noticed a great improvement of togetherness within the board, have you noticed a closer relationship between and acceptability between the Reform and Progressive movement and Orthodox rabbis?
I am very pleased to say that I have beautiful relationships with a lot of my Orthodox colleagues, rabbis. Institutionally, as I said, there is a problem. But relationship-wise, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I'm very blessed. Thank you. I just want to say, I know I had a little cry, but I'm happy to have feisty questions. I can take it. Okay? I can both cry and respond.
Can you remember to state your name and constituency, Jonathan?
Jonathan Cole, Westminster Synagogue.
Oh.
This is my first triennial, a new deputy. This is my first time up here.
Yeah, your maiden speech.
And I have an observation and a question. First, I just want to say
What question?
an observation and a question. I feel I almost know you because I read your father's autobiography.
Oh, gosh.
And when I started, when I was elected to this post, I read 2 things. I read your father's autobiography, and I read the 250-year anniversary
Wow, well done
book.
on both.
They were so full of such great information, and also in light of a
Lovely chap. Jonathan, you need to ask me a question because I can see our good president doing the president
Yeah, I'm
thing.
going to try to just do one quick observation and one quick question. So the observation, particularly with our senior past president recently passing away, and also understanding a bit of the history,
Yes.
the observation is I think the organization
You're on
needs...
Amber. You have to finish the question.
The organization needs to draw strength from its great history, and I wanted to ask the board other ideas on how we keep everybody understanding of all the luminaries who have been here before us.
Of all the...
luminaries who have come before us on this board.
Gosh, what a great question. It's actually your. Sorry, I'm sorry to do this. I actually think it's a question for you guys. Okay. Thank you, Jonathan.
Marilyn, please show them how it's done to ask a
Show
question.
I'm showing.
Good
I'm
woman
showing.
with the lovely
Yeah.
dress.
So, Marilyn Trovato, Sinai Synagogue, Leeds.
Yes.
This is a bit more serious. So I'm
The others
and
were quite
thank you,
serious.
Rabbi Klausner. Thank you for that.
Janner-Klausner, probably.
The board is doubtless aware, and obviously yourself, of the Church of England's publication to
great
address
question.
outdated doctrinal positions,
Yep.
which have led to a massive anti-Semitic sentiment over the centuries. The document begins by saying, Christians must repent for centuries of anti-Semitism, which ultimately led to the Holocaust.
Yep.
However, the chief rabbi, Ephraim Merbes, in an afterword to the document,
Yep.
has voiced concern that the Church of England's initiative is being compromised by Christian groups whose mission is to convert Jews to their own faith.
Yeah, good on you.
Question: does the board and yourself regard this proselytizing as a form of anti-Semitism? End of question.
Great question. Thank you. Okay, can I answer it? Can I maybe answer? First name? Marilyn? Marilyn, thank you very much indeed. So you may not know, but my first degree was in Christian theology, so I'm very happy to have a Christian theology question. There's a difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish theology. Anti-Semitism is a modern political movement, and what we have in many years, thousands of years of Christianity, is anti-Judaism. And yes, I think that conversion in general is not anti-Jewish. The mission at the end of all the Gospels to spread the word and to actively convert is a mission to say that I have a better way than you. I think forced conversion, and I have been at the end of oppressive harassment around my Judaism, is a form of anti-Judaism, anti-Jewish theology. I don't think it's anti-Semitism, because it belongs to the Christianity theology world, and I think you need to, as I said before, you have to react to anti-Semitism by being precise. I totally disapprove of it, I loathe it, and the word evangelism still remains one of the three pillars of our really fantastic Archbishop's ministry. So there is an ambivalence around evangelism that I think is important to name, that is anti-Jewish. And I also want to say it occurs in a lot of the very right-wing Christian Zionists, because part of that right-wing Christian Zionist apocalyptic vision is that, of course, when we come back to Israel, then there will not be Jews. So we also have to be careful what we do with our allies. Thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi Laura, thank you so much for those warm sentiments about the board.
Yes, they're true.
You talked about Gillian being astute, charismatic and principled. I think we can throw that right back at you.
Thank you, they're nice. That's why I love her.
But more than that, you gave us a call to action.
Yes.
At a time when there's too much that divides us as Jews and as a community, you've given us practical ideas and tips of what we must do and how we must act, both with each other, but broadly beyond that in society, to assume good intent and
Yes.
open the doors to difficult conversations. Your warmth and the humanity that you brought to us today are just what we need on a dull, miserable November day, 3 weeks before an election.
Oi.
You've given us a good start, a brilliant start
Thank
to the
you.
meeting, and thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for everything.
Thank you.
And can we welcome, we've got 2 new deputies who are here today. I'd like you to stand up. Victor Huglin from Allerton Synagogue, Liverpool, and Maxim Ludlak or LJ Wynetzer. Please stand. And welcome. Can we also welcome Brian Markson, our new Director of Finance. He's got the traffic light system there for us as well today. Thank you. So talking of traffic lights, we are deprived of our automatic traffic lights. So I want to remind you, when you speak and ask a question, not a statement, it's 1.5 minutes. When Brian holds up his red card, you know that you have to stop and the microphone will still be cut. And I have to remind you, deputies, we are still being live streamed and everything that you say may be reported in the media and you are responsible for your conduct. Now, the next person I would like to stand and salute is Louise Ellman, who's here at the back. She's been forced to resign from the Labour Party after 55 years. Give her a hand, everybody, for everything she's done. We salute your bravery, Louise. We admire your fortitude. We admire the good fight, your honesty and integrity. We thank you. There's another matter that I need to bring up with deputies before we start. As deputies know, we have been conducting and having our Invest in Peace events, which have been very well received up and down the country. During the week, unfortunately, an individual who had received a public order, a criminal sanction, wanted to come to our Invest in Peace event. That person also made threats against our staff. When we put on events, we reserve the right not to have people present, and the Board of Deputies will not allow our staff to be threatened. So I want that to be made clear. So I hope that you're all very understanding about that. Now, I also want to draw to your attention and thank Mitzvah Day. They're wonderful. Thank you, Laura Marks, and thank you at the back, and thank you, deputies, for bringing everything in. And when we come on to talking about the general election very soon, I'd first of all like any members of the Defence Division that are here to stand up. Can you stand up if you're in the Defence Division? Right, everybody, you can look at the people in the division. I shall mention why afterwards, so you make sure you know who they are. Right, great, thank you. If you haven't stood up, don't be shy. Anyone else? Tal, come on, Tal. And Robert, yes, Robert stood up. Good. Okay, we shall come on to that. Can we also give a special mention and warm wishes to Ealing United Synagogue on its centenary anniversary? Thank you. And regarding the forthcoming election, it's known that the Board of Deputies is a non-political organisation, but in light of the choices facing the Jewish community, we would be derelict in our duties if we did not encourage people to vote and urge them that when they do so, they consider very carefully the implications of that vote for the Jewish community. Now, deputies, you may have all got the manifesto by email. We have hard copies here for any deputy that would like it. We're also very proud of all the work that's gone into the manifesto. Deputies were consulted in the summer, and you will also see that we have this week a wraparound on the Jewish news. You can still get it, and on the back you can see the 10 commitments that we're asking of all MPs. And we will come on to hustings, but I also want to give a special mention at the beginning to Andrew Gilbert, who's been excellent at arranging a lot of the hustings. We've got 15 arranged up and down the country. It's a lot of work, so can we give him a special clap? Okay. So to confirm, the manifesto has now been sent out to thousands of parliamentary candidates, along with a summary of the 10 commitments, the ones that I've shown you that are on the back of the Jewish News. And we have asked all of the candidates to give support to what we are asking for as a Jewish community in the manifesto. Now, as well as the Jewish News, I mustn't leave out the Jewish Telegraph, because they have also got a wraparound so that you will be able to see that in Manchester. And there is a message from me in both papers giving information about the manifesto, as well as details as how to access online copies of the manifesto itself. Now, the reason I asked the Defence Division to stand up is because we need deputies to help get out our message, to identify local influencers, local councillors, and people who should be receiving our message. And there's a lot of work that the Defence Division can do to help in that process, and we're very lucky because we have regional representation. We've got Robert Festenstein in Manchester, for example, and any deputy that wants to know how they can get their message out and who the manifesto should be sent to should be working with the Defence Division, and they're all here today, the ones that have stood up, and they're very happy to work with you, because it's important that deputies work together to do what they can to make sure the manifesto is given to the right people. And because you are local deputies, you will know who you need to speak to. But coordination's very important, and we know there's been a snap election, so we need to all work together as quickly as we can to make sure that everybody who gets this doesn't just look at it in their inbox or through the post. So you can stress to them the 10 commitments, and you can also, deputies, speak to the Defence Division about getting information about hustings, and to make sure that deputies come to whatever hustings they are able to attend. And it would be very helpful if at least one member of the Defence Division can get other deputies also to come along up and down the country to those hustings, so that deputies play a full part. I'd also like to thank everybody that took part in the consultation process for the manifesto, and I think we should be proud as a community, with all our different affiliations, that we have put out a united manifesto that is done in a way that will really capture the imagination of all the candidates and is crystal clear of what the Jewish community seeks. So thank you again for your input. I know that deputies, because some of you will rapidly probably come to the stand afterwards, will have opposing issues on some issues that are in the manifesto. And of course, we cannot please everyone, but we've tried to steer a middle path. And we've told, just in case anyone is concerned, every candidate, I'll give you the quote, not every Jewish person will agree with every word written, but we believe that most Jews will agree with most of the points that we have included. We, of course, here know that whenever you have one Jew, you have 10 opinions. But as I say, the turnaround for a snap election, I think, has been excellent. And I think we should also thank Gillian and the Public Affairs team, because they've really worked hard in a very short timescale. So I hope you can give them your appreciation. Now, just to, in case those of you have already looked at the last manifesto and wanted to compare it to the one that's gone out, I'm just going to just explain some of the differences. So we've got a section on Brexit and its potential implications. And for example, we ask for legislation to ensure that terrorist organisations are subject to at least the same sanctions as operated by the EU, that Shechita is maintained, and that the Jewish community has easy access to imported kosher food, and to mitigate on any potential increase in labour costs for Jewish social care and security. There are also updates to reflect wider political movement on a number of issues. These include Hezbollah, where you will recall our advocacy in urging the government to prescribe the organisation in full, which has been successful. So we want to make sure that that is continued. You will also remember the huge involvement that Deputies had on our policy for organ donation, which has evolved with the government's policy and on consultation with all our denominations and consultant medical expert. And once again, I do want to also thank David Katz. I think I've seen him in the room for all his work on that. We're very lucky to have such talented deputies. I don't think people always realise how much you contribute. And of course, whilst the main focus on racism in the manifesto is on anti-Semitism, we've also made a particular effort to stand up and oppose hate crime against all groups, whether Jews, Muslims, Black, LGBT people, travellers, and others. As I said, further copies, hard copies of the manifesto will be available to you today, and I urge everybody to take copies with you so that you can play your part. Every one of you has got a part to play regarding the manifesto, and every one of you should make contact with a representative of the Defence Division. We want you to lead in your own constituencies in championing the 10 commitments and encouraging your local candidates to express their support for these. If there are hustings, as I have said, please see Andrew Gilbert, please see the Defence Division, and make sure you attend. And if people have not voted or applied for a vote, there's still 48 hours for people to register. So that also needs to be reminded to people in your constituency if they have not registered to vote. I'm happy to take some questions. If people want to go to the microphone, do you want to go to the stand? Let Vicky Harris go first. She's on her walking stick, please.
Vicky Harris, Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue. A bi-headed question concerning Israel and the commitment that we seek on Israel. Has anyone within the board been able to determine what to make of the proposal by one of the political parties that if they were to be elected on day one, they would acknowledge the state of Palestine, and in that connection, what borders would they be assuming to be acknowledging? And as a supplementary, has International Division taken any steps to clarify that situation?
I will answer this. I recently had a meeting with the Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel where the position on Israel was raised, and I've also written a letter to Joe Swinson where I have set out the concerns that the Jewish community may have, and one of those was in relation to expressing a wish to create Palestine on day one, because that might affect the potential for negotiation. And the other policy area that I pointed out is in relation to support for Jewish faith schools. So those are policy areas that will be of concern for some Jews. Not all Jews, but that has been addressed in a written letter which we can distribute if that would help, that I have already sent about 4 weeks ago.
I don't wish to take up more time. But
Thank you. That's very good then. Can we have the next question? In the nicest possible way. Thank you.
It's all right, push it. It's okay. Didn't think I was.
Thank you.
David Safir, Mosaic Reform. Can we recognise the importance in these hustings of conducting not just closed hustings where members of the particular synagogue are invited, but open hustings, which is in fact what we are doing at Mosaic Reform, where we are having hustings for the Harrow West constituency, and we are inviting and publicising widely the opportunity for all local electors to attend. Our members don't all live in the same constituencies. Our shul is a public building. Our members are responsible citizens of the London Borough of Harrow as well as the country, and I think it's very important, in fact it's a wonderful opportunity for us to demonstrate in such hustings that we are not Jews who happen to be British, we are British and we happen to be Jewish. It's actually very much part of enhancing our reputation as citizens that we conduct open hustings.
Thank you for your question, although I appreciated the sentiment. I absolutely agree that all hustings should be open and transparent. I'm not aware of any closed door hustings, and if any would-be candidate isn't open to transparent hustings, then you have to question why they're standing at all, because they need to be held, all of the potential candidates, to account. Thank you.
Robert Stone, Finchley Reform Synagogue. Just a question.
That's good.
Following the email from the board, we contacted our council at Finchley Reform Synagogue, and they, with our support, organised the hustings. I'm proud to say they are joint hustings with the Somali Bravanese Muslim community, who we hosted for Ramadan after their mosque was burnt down. And it's attended by all candidates, including Luciana Berger, our Social Democratic candidate, our Liberal Democratic Party, and deputy. The question is, you talked about the organised hustings. Should we be informing some coordinating body about the hustings that are organised purely by a synagogue?
Right. What the hustings are being organised, and we have to congratulate everybody involved, by the Board of Deputies, the Jewish Leadership Council, and the London Jewish Forum. So we've got potential dates virtually for everything now. Some of them are public. For example, I'm chairing the hustings in Westminster on the 8th of December, but we'll make sure that we get to deputies a full list of the hustings, and I'm sure Andrew Gilbert will tell everybody that he's available in a minute to give anyone any further information. And also I want to make sure that the Defence Division are all available also to assist and organise deputies to attend hustings up and down the country. Thank you.
Barbara Simon, Hare Hayim, Manchester, but also chairman of Lauderdale Road Synagogue. Just to say that we are holding hustings on December the 4th, 7:30 to 9:30, with all 6 candidates in the Westminster North constituency, and of course it will be open to all the shuls in the area.
Thank you. Do you have a question? No. Thank you.
Hello, Anthony Adler from St Albans Mizrahi Synagogue. I'm very glad to see you on page 17 of our Jewish manifesto, a policy to show solidarity with Gypsy and traveller communities who face persecution alongside Jews during the Holocaust. With this in mind, I want to draw the attention to the board to the consultation launched by our recent guest, the Home Secretary, on the 4th of November. This proposal aims to test the appetite for empowering police to seize the vehicles and property of trespassers intending to reside in their vehicles for any period of time. The Home Secretary's proposal is to test the appetite for the state intentionally and knowingly making Gypsy and traveller families homeless, and to force them to abandon their traditional way of life. I have neither the time nor the stomach to express the horror and dread with which I consider this suggestion of seizing the property and the homes of a marginalised community, especially in a month in which multiple traveller caravans have been burnt down on a site in Glastonbury. Will the board respond to the Home Secretary's consultation, and will the board suggest that these powers might perhaps be reconsidered?
I think it's very important that respect and dignity are given to travellers, and we are, and as I've said, we've sent our manifesto, which you've read from, to all candidates. That does include the Home Secretary, so she's actually got what you have read out. So I think it's quite clear, and I'm sure she will read it. And to be fair to her, she was supportive to the Board of Deputies. She came to the board dinner as well, but she's got it from us, so she won't be in any doubt of what our position is. And of course, all travellers should be treated fairly.
Will the board be responding to the consultation, yes or no?
We will be responding to the consultation, but at the moment our focus is on the general election. But we have given the policy ask, so it's very clear. So I think there's going to be a lot of change after the general election as well. So I think we probably also need to see what happens afterwards. We need to look at everything and see what they still propose to do. But thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Andrew Gilbert, Reform Judaism, really wearing my hat as London Jewish Forum, a member of the Communities Division. First on the Jewish, thank you very much for your words about the hustings, President. I would urge consideration on the Jewish Manifesto that a permanent group is set up of deputies to work with the staff who have done an incredible job on the manifesto and its pledges, but recognising now this is nearly annual in terms of council elections, in general elections, that the reality is that deputies and the promises made in this are policies of the board, become policies of the board, and there is not the consultation possible, and therefore you need deputies from each division and other deputies with the experience to be involved. And I would urge consideration being given to that.
As I've said, thank you for that, and thank you again. The Defence Division are here, and this is something that I've asked the Defence Division to start now, and I think they definitely should do what you say, and they should be carrying on with this work because it's good solid work for the Defence Division to do, and it shows the action and the steps that they're taking. So that's an excellent suggestion, and that I will await seeing what the Defence Division have got to say, how they can implement that.
But the important of the pledges...
Thank you. We're not able, unfortunately, to debate, but thank you for your question.
Can I just move on to hustings, or you want to take it to a different point?
Yeah, sure.
On the hustings, I approached every single deputy in London, Essex and Hertfordshire on behalf of London Jewish Forum, the board and the JLC, about doing hustings very early in the process. Many communities came back. We didn't turn around to people and say the type or nature of the hustings that should be. It was up to each community. Some communities are doing it on Shabbat. It is a closed piece of their community, and it's great if they can do that. Equally, it's great if you do it as your synagogue alone and you fill the room. It's great if you do it together. It's great if you do it multi-faith. And we applaud the effort by local deputies, local synagogues, local communities, local Rabbonim to make this happen across London, Essex and Hertfordshire and through the board across the country. The number of hustings that have been pulled off are immense. There were other places, and I won't mention them, communities that thought about it, didn't feel they had the resources this time, and I hope in future they decide to do it as well. And we need to work locally to empower deputies and communities to take this on. MPs don't have to, and prospective members of Parliament do not have to agree to do hustings. And therefore, it is a difficult job to get together. But I think those communities have taken it on. Many hustings have happened, and I look forward in future elections to even more.
You're on red. Can I say, of course, hustings cannot be recorded or anything on Shabbat, but it's my personal view that hustings should be open and transparent. If people won't and they're closed, I understand that, but I think deputies and everyone else should encourage open hustings is my view. But whatever can be arranged, we're all grateful for that to happen.
And can I thank also Jewish News and CFT?
Thank you. That's it. Thank you. Louise.
Louise Ellman, Jewish Labour Movement. I welcome the manifesto and particularly the sections on anti-Semitism, racism and extremism, which of course are linked. And I left the Labour Party after 55 years because I could see how within the party, and it happens elsewhere too, evil can grow from small beginnings. And people who see what is wrong, some of whom speak out, others who don't, and others who just go along with silence. Now, I noticed that in the manifesto, one of the pledges that is being asked of candidates is that they support campaigns against anti-Semitism. But I wonder if consideration could be given to hardening that and to make it clear that individuals are expected to speak out against what is wrong and evil growing in their midst and not wait for other people to start those campaigns.
Can the remaining questions be concise so that we have enough time for all the further questions we need to have today?
Maurice Lawson of Reading Hebrew Congregation. The board has repeatedly stated that, as always, we will make no recommendation on how individual Jews should vote. There's still time to put this weak approach right to a matter the scale of which has never before been faced by the Jewish community in the UK. But the President has argued that we're a non-political organisation and claimed that our charitable status would be at risk if we commented directly. This is simply wrong. The Charity Commission gives guidelines which explicitly say that political activity carried out in the context of supporting the delivery of its charitable purposes is not only permissible, but even clarifies that a charity may choose to focus on political activity for a period. The key is supporting the delivery of our charitable purposes. By not condemning, we are saying it's okay to vote Labour. Why does this leadership continue to avoid doing the right thing?
Your Honour, Amber. I'd be very disappointed, actually, if anybody were to clap with respect in response to that suggestion, because the board has been absolutely firm and absolutely vocal on challenging and criticising the Labour Party's inability to deal with the anti-Semitism in its ranks. In fact, any of you that watched on television the Corbyn-Johnson debate heard the phrase that the board referred to Labour as a cesspit of anti-Semitism. And I said that in response to the interview on the Panorama programme. People listen and take notice of the board. We've seen the demonstrations outside Westminster in March 18 and in Manchester September 18, and we have made abundantly clear where we stand on this issue. And we, in conjunction with the other communal organisations, in particular the CST and the JLC, repeatedly present a series of recommendations and demands to the Labour Party to enable it to rid itself of all anti-Jewish racism. And it's been made clear, absolutely clear, what they have to do. You might have seen in the week, we also tweeted out again the board's letter of the 19th of July, when John McDonnell dared to suggest that Labour had done everything that we had asked them to do. At this time, the organisation has never in its history, I have to say, directed Jews how to vote. And most Jews, we believe, would bridle against that. And we have made it absolutely clear what the issues are and think that each and every Jew and deputy is perfectly capable of analysing and listening to the situation at hand, both in terms of anti-Semitism and the wider issues in society, and to be able to cast their vote. The board's charitable position does depend upon the board being non-political, and the Charity Commission have sent written guidance to all of the charities, including us. We are not permitted to tell people how to vote.
Okay, I'm Shelley Salter, and I'm from the liberal Jewish community in St John's Wood, but I live in the constituency of Hornsey and Wood Green. And I'd just like to say that our Liberal candidate is not happy that our hustings are being held in a synagogue because she says she feels it's partisan to one community. That's what she said. We do have about a 20% Jewish community in Hornsey and Wood Green. We also have a very strong Labour membership. It is very big in Hornsey and Wood Green. And it's quite an unpleasant election, if you ask me, at the moment. And also, I'd just like to say, talking about Laura's way of handling defamation in modern Britain, we had a very uncomfortable incident in our local pub. This guy, who obviously was a Brexiteer, he was giving a lot of racial comments to our little group, and it was very uncomfortable. And that is the reality of grassroots campaigning in North London.
Is your question coming?
There's no question. It's a statement of fact and how you deal with the real world.
Right. That's one of the reasons, just not pointing you out, that we have 1.5 minutes, because that should be for asking a question. But thank you for that.
Good morning. My name is David Benson. I'm from Central Synagogue in Birmingham. I've only recently joined the board, and this is my first question. And I give you my word of honour, it will be a question. It will be short, or she won't ask me back again. The question is, I notice in the document there is no mention whatsoever of the environment. Don't you think we should be concerned and show our concern for the environment and issues under climate change?
Before you all clap, you have to get your facts right. Look at number 9, the environment. It's on page 44, and we've also been very vocal promoting eco-synagogue. And this is very important. So it is here, we promise. So if you have a read, it genuinely is, and the environment is important to us. And it's also commitment number 9.
Okay, I've written to BMA asking them why they're still using single-use plastic cups. Well, they are. That's what those are. And they're going to be illegal, surely. Anyhow, my case
are informed that they are environmentally friendly. But we did like your question, and we do want you to ask others. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Joe Millis, Bromley Reform. I know it probably plays well with a certain number of postcodes and with certain people, our stance. But outside, in the real world, does the President not think that we kind of look as if we don't care about homelessness or the growing number of people having to use food banks and the health service and other things which real people outside these four walls and outside the mainly Jewish areas care about? Thank you. Also, just in answer to your question, your answer to me, I have to say
you're on Amber.
I know.
You're here for questions, not
just
debate.
To say that context on is probably, if I heard the word context so many times, I'd be rich by now.
Now, many Jews were traditionally in the Labour Party because we were very proud to care about those values that Joe has spoken about. And of course, we all care about food banks, homelessness, and the state of our country. And racism, which is what anti-Semitism also goes to the very heart of that. And you will have noticed last week, we've also set out our concerns for racism in other parties, anti-Semitism, with 2 people potentially suspended, or have been suspended in the Conservative Party, and 1 person in the Liberal Democrats. But at the heart of all our core values, and I think Rabbi Laura Janner-Klausner explained that well, Jews care about society, playing our part in society, and all of the things that Joe have mentioned is also very important. Thank you.
I'm going to be the voice of gloom and doom.
I think he's satisfied with that.
I'm going to be the voice of gloom and doom, I'm afraid.
My name is Keith Appleby. I'm from St Albans United.
Can you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Thought I was. My name is Keith Appleby from St Albans United. And my question, unfortunately, is a bit of gloom and doom. I would like to know if there is a practical plan in place if Jeremy Corbyn becomes the next Prime Minister. In other words, will we need more security for schools and shuls and communal buildings, or protection for the supply lines for kosher food and that kind of thing? Because they're going to throw the manifesto out on day one.
I think in the Labour Party manifesto and during the week, the Labour Party has already announced, in relation to your question, that they still will continue funding for the CST. I think after the general election, we've all got to have a very, very good look at who is elected. You cannot call from one day to another at the moment what might happen, and overlaying everything else is Brexit. The Board of Deputies is here to advocate for Jews, and we will advocate for all these things that are important to us and in our manifesto. So I don't think people should be concerned about CST, because that pledge has already been made, and there's no indication that we will not be able to get kosher food. So I think that's as well placed as we can be at the moment on that question. What we want to do now, sorry, it won't take very long, we want to have a group photograph, which we've never had before, of everybody standing up with their manifestos. So do you think we could do that? We're just going to go down to the bottom of the hall. Thank you. I think that's our first group photograph that we've had. Can I just go on to the minutes of the board meeting held on the 15th of September? Did anybody have any comment, as I didn't get anything from you, so can I take those as read? Thank you. Oops. We're coming on to the President's statement now.
Robert Stonefish, Reform Synagogue again, but this is a short point of order. It relates to the statement. There's clear guidance on the questions for deputies that the limit for deputies' questions is 50 words. Not one of the 5 questions here is less than 50 words. They range from 84 to 203. The average is 146 words, and almost all of them are opinion pieces disguised as questions. If I want to read opinion pieces, I can, lengthy and opinionated opinion pieces, I can buy the Jewish Chronicle. I would ask, and I will put to the F&O, that we have a procedure that makes questions to the President, questions that give the President an opportunity to say something, not the Deputy an opportunity to sound off, and to sound off in a way in which they repeated the same point at this platform today under the first item on the agenda. Please let's have questions for the President.
Thank you. A very good reminder. So, the President's statement. We probably covered some of the ground, and you will also see that there are some additional questions which were unfortunately left off. So, I'm just going to read out the questions and the answers, if you would bear with me for those questions which unfortunately didn't make it. Richard Cooper from Portsmouth and Southsea Hebrew Congregation, his question: have you complained to Pearson about Edexcel's anti-Semitically twisted textbook, Conflict, Crisis and Change, the Middle East 1917 to 2012 by Hilary Brash? And if not, please can you explain why you consider it inappropriate for the Board of Deputies to object to it? The answer was, we have indeed written to Pearson Chief Executive John Fallon to bring his attention to this textbook, which suffers from an unacceptable slant amounting to bias, which lets down students seeking a serious understanding of an important and complex subject. We have gone further and sought a substantial rewrite. We await his reply, and thank you also to Richard for this question. The next question is from Lawrence Julius, Constituency, Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue, Holland Park. The question: every year on 30th November, Israel remembers 850,000 Jews who were forced to flee Arab lands. This year was the 70th anniversary of 50,000 Yemeni Jews, over 90% of the community being evacuated to Israel on the wings of an eagle. There are under 50 Jews left in Yemen today. This year was also the 50th anniversary of the Baghdad hangings and the disappearance of around 50 several Jews in the aftermath of the Six-Day War. Next year will be the 70th anniversary of around 125,000 Jews leaving Iraq, around 90% of the community. There are less than 5 Jews in Iraq today. Could the board ensure Jewish refugees are not forgotten as a matter of policy every time it engages on the subject of Palestinian refugees? Answer: the ethnic cleansing of thousands of Jews from Arab lands is a human tragedy which has largely been ignored by the outside world. However, we remember the crimes perpetrated against them, and we will continue to ensure that this tide of refugees is never forgotten. And I have to commend particularly our Vice President, Edwin Schuker, who does a tremendous amount of work on this area. Does anyone have any questions for the President's statement? Would you please go to the microphone and remember the very wise words of Robert Stone? And we also have to thank those who are doing the live streaming for us, because they're very good, Leo and Selwyn. A reminder that all deputies are responsible for their conduct.
Richard Sassoon from the Spanish-Portuguese community. Item 6 of the President's report, which was about the saving of Sukkot by rescuing the Etrogs. I want to bring up a parallel situation where the board hasn't acted, and that was the shortage in October reported widely of hummus. Particularly for Sephardi Jews, it's a very, very important staple of our diet. And I want to know, having saved the etrog, what is the board doing to save the humble shawarma?
Thank you for that. I suggest the best thing to do is for you to submit a nice paper on it, and we shall all discuss. But yes, hummus is extremely important. Thank you. Amos, I'm sure that you have something equally serious that
equally uniting, I'm sure. Amos Schonfield, Deputy for Yachad. Over the past 2 weeks, we have seen two important yet contradictory announcements regarding the Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territory. On one hand, we saw the ECJ ruling that foodstuffs originating in the territories occupied by the State of Israel must bear the indication of their territory of origin, and yet, on the other hand, we saw that same division and distinction erased by the Secretary of State in the US, Mike Pompeo, regarding the United States policy on this. The need to distinguish and reinforce the distinguishing features between Israel proper and the occupied territories is one of the main fail-safes that we have to ensure that boycotts for Israel are not boycotting Israel in its entirety. And when we erase that distinction, we struggle against the measures within the BDS movement. And it's vital that we disentangle Israel itself from the occupation and the endangering measures it has for the long-term survival of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. Yes, and here is my question. Given what we've seen of Boris Johnson's relationship to Donald Trump and the willingness to follow those measures, will the HOs have a strategy have a strategy for if and when Boris Johnson does a similar measure to what Mike Pompeo has done?
I don't think we should be speculative, but I do believe that the Conservative manifesto has said that they will make sure that councils up and down the country do not allow BDS. That is one aspect of it. And the rest of it is, I think, a very big question, and we will have to wait and see what happens from the general election. But I know you are advocating your point. Thank you.
Warren Usden, Yeshurun Hebrew Congregation, South Manchester. Whatever happens with the election, whatever the outcome of the election, at the moment the HRC investigation into the Labour Party is ongoing. It appears unlikely, not surprisingly, that it will report before the date of the election. Has the board made any representations to the HRC about the importance of reporting before the 12th of December? And also, is the board satisfied that it has contributed all it can to that investigation and that it is ready for the outcome of it, which could be quite explosive?
I think a lot of the board's material has been used by others to make those representations, and the board's material is quite expensive. It's been extensive and expensive. It's been well publicised that the campaign for anti-Semitism and also the Jewish labour movement have made extensive representations, and there's only so many times the same representations can be made. But the board is obviously awaiting the outcome of this, but it's not going to be before the election, so we will have to deal with it. I understand the outcome is going to be in January, so we will have to wait and see. But I think we all know our views as to what the likely outcome is going to be.
Martin Motz, Northwest Surrey Synagogue. The campaign against anti-Semitism has announced that on the Sunday, the 8th of December, at 1:15, they're going to hold a rally in Parliament Square saying that we stand together against anti-Semitism. What's the board's position on this rally?
I've already spoken to my communal colleagues on this, and it's not something that we feel is the right time to have a rally just imminently before the general election at that point. So that's the position of the other communal organisations. There wasn't consultation about it in advance, but had there been, we would have mentioned that as well. But we very much value the work of the CAA. They do a tremendous amount of good work and they deserve congratulations for all they do.
And Doris Schmetterling, New West End Synagogue in the constituency of Westminster North, although I emphasise I don't actually live there. In the context of BDS and the like, I wanted to check when there are references to Judea and Samaria and potentially the Golan Heights, will the board refer to these as disputed territories rather than occupied? Thank you.
I suggest that you give all your comments to the Israel survey, which is going to be set out shortly, and Sheila will discuss that. I'll leave her to that bit in the report for the international division, so you can wait for that shortly.
Mary Rainier Lee, Western Marble Arch Synagogue. Given the previous speaker who made the assumptions in asking his questions that the West Bank was illegally occupied and that the settlements are illegal, will the board support, this is my question, will the board support a proper investigation of the international law, which will, I think, produce the opposite result, so that we can all be sure as to what the legal position is when we are responding to statements which may not be supported in international law?
I think I've said from the beginning of my time when I stood for Hastings on that question that the issue about the settlements does relate to a matter of international law, but I'm sure Sheila will also be delighted to address that in her report.
We will be addressing it ourselves in the Defence Division.
Robert Fessenstein, Prestwich Hebrew Congregation. On the 12th of November, there was a report in the Jewish Chronicle where a spokesman from the board made a promise about an investigation to the complaints to the Constitution Committee. The individual was not named, and that which was attributed to that individual was factually incorrect. Can you tell us...
I'm going to stop you now because, I'm sorry, because where and if a complaint has been made, we're not able...
This is not about the complaint.
I'm sorry, it's totally inappropriate to seek
It's not.
discuss
This is about a secret briefing to the Jewish Chronicle that we're entitled to know about. Who was it who said this?
I don't even know what you're even referring to, but I want to make it clear to you that we're not going to discuss anybody who is or may be subject to a complaint, because that isn't right. We have a process through the Constitution Committee. Thank you.
Marvin Benjamin, Hendon United Synagogue. Madam President, I think we ought to acknowledge the position of the Jewish Chronicle. The Jewish Chronicle has, I think, reached its most important period of its history. They have managed to focus the situation of anti-Semitism not only in the Labour Party, but in other areas of the community. And I think we would do well to commend them for the work that they have done. They have shone the light on areas that in the past have been ignored or at least have not been taken account of. Not only is the board and the Jewish Leadership Council fighting the good fight, but we are very fortunate to have at the moment a situation at the Jewish Chronicle that backs it up all the way along the line, and we should be very grateful for their support. I think they are coming to now what could be described as their finest hour. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think it's fair to say that the Jewish Chronicle has extensively covered anti-Semitism. They have also extensively sought to cover the board and the board's president, as we know, for some time, but they do have very detailed reports that are very ongoing in relation to anti-Semitism. And I have to commend also the Jewish News and the Jewish Telegraph. We're very proud of our Jewish newspapers and press, And the Jewish News is a very fine community newspaper. And for example, we all want to congratulate, I meant to say earlier, the 90 birthday wishes that were given to Seben Helfgott. So the Jewish press can do some really wonderful things. So I don't know if Seben is actually here. No, he's not here today, but he's here in spirit. But thank you. No other questions? Okay. I'm now going to call on Edwin, who is going to do a reading of the Knesset Law of Return.
Deputies, on the 29th of November 1947, the United Nations proposed a partition of Palestine. The very next day, on the 30th of November, the Arab League rejected this partition plan and started systematically to ethnically cleanse the Jewish population of the Arab countries. That is why 30th of November was chosen by the Knesset to commemorate the expulsion and displacement of 856,000 Jews from Arab countries. Today, there's barely 3,500 left in the entire region. I'm going to read the background for that law in abridged format. When the issue of refugees is raised within the context of the Middle East, people invariably refer to Palestinian refugees, virtually never to Jews displaced from Arab countries. Historically, Jews and Jewish communities have existed in the Middle East, North Africa, and the Gulf region for more than 2,600 years. Jews in substantial numbers resided in what are today Arab countries for centuries while relegated to second class. It is important to note that when the 1948, the status of Jews in the Arab countries worsened dramatically as many Arab countries declared war or backed the war against the newly founded State of Israel. Jews were either uprooted from their countries of long-time residence or became subjugated, political hostages of the Arab-Israel conflict. In virtually all cases, as Jews left the country, individual and communal properties were confiscated without compensation. Since 1948, over 856,000 Jews have left their birthplaces and their homes in some 10 Arab countries. The fact that Jews displaced from Arab countries were indeed bona fide refugees under international law is beyond question. Two laws were enacted in the Knesset. One in 2010, reserving the right and actually urging the State of Israel not to go into any peace plan without securing compensation for those Jews. This was in 2010. In 2014, you take the declaration of November the 30th as a day to be commemorated every year. It instructed a very major central event, also a special Knesset discussion every single year. All schools in Israel are told about this in the morning of the 30th of November, and more importantly for us, all the embassies were instructed to carry out events around the 30th of November. This year they have been absolutely marvelous across the world and across the globe. Israeli embassies and Vivi Eisen here from the Israel embassy here in London have carried out these events and carrying out across Europe and even the world. So we thank them for that, and we thank them for commemorating this. I just want to mention a few passing things that happened this year. My MP, Secretary of State, Teresa Villiers, actually brought to the House, for the very first time ever, a debate on the Jews of Arab countries as refugees. It was well attended, and fantastic points were made. We look forward to after the election, please God, that we should carry on that in order to maybe obtain a kind of a resolution from the UK Parliament on the same way that we have obtained one on the Congress and the Canadian Parliament. We're very hopeful. The Board of Deputies had stood with this subject 100% right from the very first time. And we're talking about more than a decade of support. And this year, the staff are working with the right divisions to make sure that next year, November 30th, every Jewish school in the UK will have something to commemorate on that day. If you want more information and more details, this excellent book, Uprooted by Lynn Julius, I'm sure Lawrence will be very happy to take orders. And also, please attend the November 30th Saturday night do that is organized in commemoration of that. Also check with Lawrence. I just want to thank the board, and I want to ask you guys, please help us establish that day forever as the day of commemoration. Let's have it on the calendar, but more importantly, let's have it on our hearts and minds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edwin. I'm going to go on to the divisional reports because we're going to be very short of time. And I obviously want to say to people before they vote that any party that has a manifesto, it's their manifesto. So we can't be held to account definitively if parties are going to promise what they've pledged. And in relation to the question before about Labour, about the CST and kosher food, one can only go on what has been put in a manifesto, so I just want to refine that answer slightly. Can I please ask Amanda to present the report, and we will run out of time if people are not concise with questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. In presenting my Defence Division report to you, I just want to make the comment that you'll all share with me that the IRA definition of anti-Semitism is increasingly being used, as I'm sure you're aware, by universities as an important step to protecting Jewish students, Jewish academics and Jewish staff on campus. So we were pleased to see just on Friday that the UCL Governing Council has approved the adoption of the IRA definition in full. This has taken some time to get through, and the support from UJS, from our own professional staff team, and indeed from David Katz, has all gone an enormous way to helping to make this happen. Disappointing, however, that also this week Bristol University hasn't adopted the full definition of IRA, and we, of course, call on them to do so. So I just wanted to add that to the report. Thank you. And I'll take any questions.
Chaim Ben Sion, Masorti Judaism. To Amanda, last night I had an animated argument with a Corbynist Labour canvasser who told me that a Jewish organisation has admitted that the anti-Semitic allegations in the Labour Party are all lies and media hype. Essentially, no anti-Semitism, no problem, no apology. That organisation is Jewish Voice for Labour, who have produced an internal briefing for canvassers, a copy of which I have here. In essence, JVL is now involved with anti-Semitism denial, which will in turn encourage and embolden anti-Semites on the far left. Has the board taken action against JVL, and if not, can action be taken against JVL to stop this blatant whitewashing? And that's the...
Thank you. So hi, I am aware of the canvassers document here and another online resource that JVL have recently updated. And yes, we did discuss whether we should make a statement and how we should deal with it. This isn't new information. It's been out there that the information that they produce has been in the public domain for some time, and it's in fact what they set themselves up to do, to put together this information to defend Jeremy Corbyn and the anti-Semitism that takes place within the party. And so right now, what we are doing is we're treating it with the contempt that we believe that it deserves. And at this point, we haven't made any statement on it.
Can I just mention we're really running short on time,
Quick
so can we have essential questions?
Madam President, quick question to Amanda. Very quick question. Russell Conn, Deputy for Holy Law and JRC President. Very quick question. Apparently there's on social media, there's this video of this Muslim lady standing up for the father and son on the tube the other day. Is it appropriate for the board to make a comment on this? And if so, what comment should we make?
So the incident, for people that haven't, that is not aware of it, there was an incident, an anti-Semitic incident on a tube train on Friday, sort of lunchtime-ish, just before Shabbat, which sort of went reasonably viral on Twitter on the basis that the only person on the tube that stood up for the Jewish guy and his family was a Muslim woman. And we understand from media today that the person involved in the incident has been arrested. And so we, of course, recognise and applaud the Muslim woman who stood up. As Louise said earlier, when these incidents take place, people need to stand up and to get and to make the point and stand up and stand out for it, and we applaud her for doing it. We haven't made a public statement at this point because, as I say, it took place just before Shabbat, and here we are on Sunday morning. So, but yes, it does merit words, and of course we say thank you to her, and she is being lauded as a hero, and so she is for standing up on it.
Thank you, Sheila. And before Sheila starts, we have to be brief with the division reports because we've got a very important film to show you that takes 8 minutes.
Thank you, Marie. Am I switched on? Thank you. No sound. Okay, thank you, Marie. Always help with the tech. I'm known for being brief, so here we go. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Present my report. Thank you to all the deputies who've worked with me on the division and all the staff, and also a big welcome to Talia Ingleby, who has joined us, replacing Marius as my International Relations Officer and backbone. Thank you. Just to mention, Marie alluded to the fact that we have a survey that we are really progressing very well with. We've brought in professional experts to help with this. It's for all deputies. We hope to roll it out in January. It will be tried and tested beforehand by members of the division. So it will help inform the board's policies as to our attitudes towards Israel, what the board should do, the terminology, people's affiliations. You know, this is a very in-depth survey that will be available online and would also have hard copies available. And I want to thank everybody who has helped really hard. This has never been done before in the board's history, that we will be able to find out the consensus of what the deputies feel the board should do in relation to our position to Israel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Edwin has said he wants to say one sentence. Brief one. Come on, Edwin.
Okay, so we are halfway through our division agenda for 3 years. We, unfortunately, my vice chair, due to personal reasons, Richard Benson, has resigned, and therefore there is not one but several places on the division. For next meeting, we will have an election. I urge you to think. You've got a month to think about it. If you can contribute to anything we can do, you can come over and visit our division and observe it if you want to. But please put your names forward and let's have the second half, a brilliant second half to finish the agenda. That's it. I'll finish, Mary.
Thank you. Carol.
Thank you, Mari. Carol Abrahams, Catford and Bromley Synagogue, where we co-hosted an extremely successful Invest in Peace event, and I know there are 7 other deputies here who've also been working on this. I just want to say a question to both Sheila and Edwin. Speaking to Sharon Booth afterwards, who runs Solutions Not Sides, so far 100 peace activists have taken part in this programme. That's 50 young Israeli peace activists and 50 young Palestinian peace activists. Can I please ask whether the existence of these events and the result of these events is fed back to the Israeli government and to the Palestinian Authority, because it is our hope for the future.
Can I say I'm very grateful I've intervened here. Very grateful for the feedback on Invest in Peace, and I'm also trying to see if we can get additional funding to be able to extend Invest in Peace further, and that's something very active. And I'm sure you'll support what I said earlier, that we don't want any public order offences committed at our Invest in Peace events, because you've seen how valuable they are. And I think what you said is very important in terms of feedback, that we should consider how we use the feedback from those events, and that's something I think we'll take on board and all discuss, because I'm very proud of that programme, as it was something that came from my division initially, and I think how we use it and what we do with it is very, very fair. And thank you for hosting.
We will be experimenting this year with 2 samples, the same Invest in Peace formula, but in mosques rather than churches as well. So that would be this 2020's revision.
Stuart, if you can be very brief, because I've got 8 minutes for the film.
My divisional members, they're oppressing us yet again. It's all in the report. In section 4, expenditure numbers are marked as thousands, not as millions, but we have it very under control. The ship is still tight. If anyone has any questions, please get hold of me or Tony Seymour, the divisional vice chair, or Brian Markison, our finance director. Away from this meeting, we'll be pleased to address this. Since everyone else seems intent on speaking of the virtues of different organisations, Victor Hubelin and I are going after this to the reunion of participants in the last March of the Living. I cannot commend that to you strongly enough. There's another one happening in the new year. On which note, I thank you for your attention. Again, come to me with any questions in the interest of time after the meeting. Thank you. Although someone does have a question.
And they're going to have to be brief, because
Okay.
I'm determined that we are going to be showing this film.
Norman Frankel, Edgware United Synagogue. It would be appropriate to know how many deputies attended the dinner. If not, do they really support the board?
Thank you. I'll get the answer to you. I don't have the answer to hand.
I just want to mention the dinner isn't for deputies, it's our major fundraising event of the year. It's to raise money so that the Board of Deputies can, with the greatest of respect, continue to exist and do all the work that we need to do. Thank you.
Rob Sassoon, under 35 observer for the S&P Sephardi community. I've heard people describe these plenary meetings as a talking shop, and whether you think that's the case or not, in my case, this is literally true, because as an under 35 observer, I'm allowed to stand here and speak, but I'm not actually allowed to vote. Looking around the room today, I can see at most maybe 6 people who are under the age of 35. And I believe of those 6, I'm the only one who's an under 35 observer. We are quite literally the future of this Jewish community, but I feel like the board's efforts so far to engage younger people with the excellent work that we do are perhaps not living up to the fullest expectations. So whilst it's been a really good start over the past 10 years to invite synagogues and other organisations to send under 35 observers to these plenaries, do you think it's about time that the board let us have a vote as well?
This is something that we can consider at the next F&O meeting. There's nothing wrong with that. Good suggestion.
I might want to mention, deputies, if you're talking about age, every contribution, every age is extremely valuable. And while I'm not exactly a spring chicken young observer, I'm not that old either. And the leadership is very diverse, as you will have noted, and I'm very proud. We have had women deputies since before women got the suffrage and the vote in the UK, so I'm proud of our history. I have to show the film. Thank you. Flora, can you do your question briefly?
Flora Frank, British Emuna. Marie, you said, this is a question to Sheila. Marie, when a question was asked about the Golan Heights and Judea and Samaria, you said that Sheila would answer it, but it wasn't answered unless I missed something.
Okay, Flora, thank you. So the terminology that is used by the board to cover all aspects of Israel and territories and how they should be described will be part of the board survey. Everybody will have a voice as to be able to say the way the board should view its approach to talking about Israel across all the aspects. And I urge you, when the time comes, please engage with this survey. Thank you.
Deputies, at the board's annual dinner, we have a fundraising film, but we want to say this film is so much more than that. We are tremendously proud of the film that we're going to show you, and I want to show you the high quality and sort of person that is prepared, these people, to support the board and all our endeavours. I'd like to thank Gillian and all the staff team for the film that you're going to see, and I think it's really impactful, and it's in a way that young people, Rob's just talked about young people, will really relate to what you're going to see. And I want you to see also how much our work and everything that you do is really appreciated. So we're just going to run this film now, so thank you.
When I was very young, my parents took me on a day trip to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. I was probably far too young to go, but it was one of the most defining moments of my life. I saw images that will stay with me forever, piles of bodies, children's shoes. I think it set me up for a lifetime of realizing what happens when racism can get hold of a society and it goes unchecked. I'm an actor and a writer. I'm not a politician and I'm not an activist. But I've been forced to speak out against the rise of anti-Semitism in this country because it has really disturbed me. And it has worried me that so few people in power have taken it as seriously as they should. The Jewish community finds itself in the pincer grip of the far right and the hard left. The same tropes, the same lies, the same dangerous message. I felt I had to speak out because I didn't have a choice. I took a risk, potentially, for my career and for my well-being. And what I have found in the process is that I've had to discover who I am, and I've discovered many allies along the way, people who also felt that they had to speak out.
I gradually noticed more and more anti-Semitism and negativity around Jews, and because I wasn't integrated into the community, by the time it reached me, it was mainstream. I'm Jewish, I'm not particularly practicing, and when I started looking into it more and getting more and more nuggets of what's actually going on, who's saying what, and even Holocaust deniers as candidates for the Labour Party, I saw that there was a huge problem, and the amount of information that I was receiving about it from the mainstream media didn't match that, and I was confused. The normalisation of it meant that I couldn't keep quiet, because by the time it got to me, there's a significant problem, and I felt like I had a voice, and if I had a voice, I had to help. The last year or so has been an absolute roller coaster, and in the online world I've had to learn how to deal with hate, how to deal with Holocaust deniers, how to deal with people that are trying to shut you up. It's introduced me to a whole new world of hate and a whole new world of activists. The BAD were one of the first groups that invited me in and wanted to chat and share our experiences, and it's been fantastic knowing that I have their support and they certainly have my support.
One of the positive things that has come out of this is how many friends and allies that we have. Wonderful voices who really didn't need to speak out, really didn't need to stand up, but have done. Personally, I've been humbled by the level of support that I've had from friends, colleagues, strangers, And some of the most powerful voices speaking out on this haven't even been from within our community.
Well, those of us who are in Parliament, all in our very tiny little way, are national leaders. And it is a definition of leadership that you fight against discrimination, intolerance, and therefore to fight against anti-Semitism. And it's not good enough to be a bystander, and it's not good enough to fight one form of anti-Semitism but then to ignore another form of anti-Semitism. I'm the National Advisor to Government appointed by the Prime Minister to advise on tackling anti-Semitism. I will carry out that role. I will do so without bias. I will hold to account anti-Semites and those who facilitate or encourage anti-Semitism. If I can achieve that in some small way, then it will have been a valuable contribution to my country and to the values of my country and the values of my family. The board has a pivotal role to play in bringing together the Jewish community, every part of the Jewish community. The Board of Deputies has to be at the forefront of that fight.
I think the Jewish community, in all its different shapes and guises, has the right to self-define as it chooses, to be as irreligious as it wants and to be as religious as it wants, to be as identifying or as not, but it's our choice. I also think that we need education programs to go out and show the wider world what Judaism is about. We also need to have strong interfaith work, showing that all minorities and religions and faiths can stand together. I found some of my greatest allies in other religions and other communities. They've stood shoulder to shoulder with me and me them. This is from the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend Justin Welby. Education towards learning across faiths is becoming ever more vital. There's a sense of the growing vulnerability of religious and other minorities in the UK today. The Board of Deputies' work in advocating for the UK Jewish communities and challenging anti-Semitism is a necessary task and integral to the better flourishing of our life together as a nation. In their support of initiatives across faith communities, the Board of Deputies model the positive engagement in the public square that has always been such a hallmark of the Jewish tradition and British Judaism.
Interaction with, as well as education about other faith communities, empowers us to embrace diversity in our society and build communities of mutual respect. Given the alarming rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in recent years, it's more important than ever that Jewish and Muslim communities collaborate and support each other. The Board of Deputies' work is critically important in these increasingly polarized times, and I'll continue to liaise with them to learn from the Jewish community's lived experiences of hostility and prejudice.
It's the voices of the young people that I've met that has really heartened me. So many young people are standing up and speaking out. Our students who are at universities, who find the word Zio being thrown at them, Councillor Jack Deakin, Isabel Housecroft, Nathan Broder, who you're going to hear from in a minute. Their voices are so important, be they Jewish or non-Jewish. These are the leaders of the future.
As the next generation of Jewish leaders, it's vital that young people join the Board of Deputies. I joined in my first year at university and have really enjoyed the opportunity to make positive decisions to improve our community. The Board of Deputies is a fantastic organisation with a brilliant history and an even better future.
Hatred of Jews has taken many forms over the years. Israel is a thorny subject. But what isn't right is when an obsessive hatred of Israel turns into another form of anti-Semitism. I myself have been on the extreme end of it. I'm constantly being told that I'm a paid Israeli agent, that I'm working for a foreign government, that I personally murder Palestinian babies. Dame Louise Ellman has been a member of the Labour Party for 55 years. She's given her life to the party. She's been an MP who has fought tooth and nail for her constituents. She's much respected and much loved. But in the last few years, because she supports the right for the State of Israel to exist and actively sees herself as a Zionist, she has faced a barrage of abuse and has been hounded out of the party that she loves.
Over the past few years, I've seen anti-Semitism in the Labour Party grow, and part of that is related to hostility to Israel, hostility to the world's only Jewish state. And that means that people look on me when I talk in support of Israel as being a racist. And that is absolutely absurd. I feel I cannot advocate supporting a Labour Party led by Jeremy Corbyn, who has really been at the front of the anti-Semitism that has grown within the Labour Party. So I've now resigned from the Labour Party. I'm very sad to have done that. I'm very traumatised by it. The Board of Deputies has stood up courageously and decisively against Labour's anti-Semitism. The Labour leadership were very shocked to see the united stand of the Jewish community led by the Board of Deputies. They like to think that opposition to what they were saying was simply to do with a fringe of Jewish people. They were shocked to find it was about the mainstream Jewish community. They haven't taken the action they should have done because their own anti-Semitism is too deeply embedded in that leadership.
These are unprecedented times to be a minority in the United Kingdom. The fact that I am having to face my identity every day as a Jewish woman, that I'm having to justify it and explain it, and talk to you about the growing rise of anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom is frankly terrifying. We have to fight this. We have to fight this through education. We have to fight this through speaking out. We have to pull together with all our divides and all our guises. All the organisations, like the Board of Deputies, that stand for us as a community, that look after our well-being and our rights, need to be supported at this moment. We're here, we're not going anywhere, and we don't want to go anywhere. We have a right to be here, we have a right to be heard, we have a right to feel safe, and we have a right to feel welcome.
I think that was an incredible film highlighting all the issues that we have to deal with day in, day out. Now, we've sent the link to Deputies, and also it's been highlighted on social media. You've all got your part to play. You could all show this film in your local shul or any other events that you want to do, or you can use it during the course of the election time for any discussions that you're having. But we heard what they had to say about the Board of Deputies. You are playing a pivotal role. We are at the forefront of the fight, and we have stood up decisively and courageously. We have stood up against anti-Semitism, particularly in the Labour Party, and against all forms of racism. We have every reason to be proud of everything that we have done as a community, as we stand together to face these challenges in unprecedented times. I urge you once again to do all you can to spread the Labour Party's anti-Semitism that has to be deplored and has to be challenged at every point. Please get the manifesto out. Please do all you can. We are a great country. We are very lucky to live here as Jews. But we have to stand up and we have to make it clear that we will not tolerate and accept anti-Semitism or any other form of racism. And we do care. We care greatly in this country. That's why racism isn't acceptable. And of course we care about the homeless, the poor, and everything else in our society. Thank you for being here today. It's really appreciated. If anyone's got any questions about the film, they can probably come and ask us briefly afterwards. But otherwise, thank you. Please remember to vote. Thank you.